Good evening, my friends. This is Paul, and today I'm going to be reviewing Namco Museum Arcade Pack for the Nintendo Switch. Now, because this is a collection of games, and I'm generally not the best at reviewing collections as opposed to single games, I decided I'm going to split this review into three distinct parts. The first part is going to be talking about the Pac-Man Championship Editions versions 1 and 2. They're very confusingly worded, so that's just what I'm going to call them for the sake of clarity. Then the second part is going to be talking about Pac-Man Versus, which was optimized for the Nintendo Switch, so that was pretty exciting to hear about that. And the final part is just going to be talking about the general old school arcade games that are included in this package, and how do I view them as a collection as opposed to the games on their own, because I tried really hard to beat them and I just couldn't. So I said I'm just going to review it as a collection, not as a game. So, that being said, Pac-Man Championship Edition is basically an amped up, disco partyified version of Pac-Man. Instead of trying to take Pac-Man in a wildly new direction like games like Pac-World and Pac-N-Roll did, this just takes the basic premise of eating dots and avoiding ghosts in a maze and basically trying to make it as techno and crazy as possible. So Pac-Dots, obviously, you're still going to be eating them, but Pac-Man moves insanely quickly, so you have to have a really quick mind to adapt to sometimes the unpredictable patterns of the ghosts and the pellets. Thankfully, the controls are really responsive to make up for it. And usually I didn't have a problem having Pac-Man go where I wanted him to go, even with him moving so quickly. Then, when you collect enough pellets, then a bonus fruit will appear, and when you collect the fruit, you'll either progress further in your objective, or you will get a power-up pellet that will turn the ghosts blue. The catch is that the ghosts have trails this time around. When they're not blue, the trails can be interrupted, but if you do that enough times, then the ghosts will get angry, and they'll turn into a single ghost and will try to actively chase you. Then again, getting a game over was never really a problem for me, so I kind of just found them as more of a distraction than an actual threat, like they were in the original arcade game. So then, you have to eat the head of the trail after you have rounded up the ghosts. So you have to predict where the ghosts are going to go and then, stop it at the head. Which sounds really complicated at first, and I'm not going to lie, this definitely has one of the hardest learning curves of a game that I have played in recent memory. In fact, I had trouble beating level 1 because the game just went at me so quickly. That being said, once you do master this game's oddities, it's an absolute blast. And you'll find yourself just pumping and jazzing your way through Pac-Man levels, and there's even boss battles too. But what's really weird is Pac-Man Championship Edition 2 plus 2P. Oh my gosh, and I thought Nintendo had bad names. Basically, that's the version that you're seeing on the screen right now. It's specifically designed for 2 players, and so what do you do when a game is designed for 2 players? Well, you test it in multiplayer, which is exactly what I did. And we had a terrible time. This game was nearly unplayable at first. Not only because we had a heck of a time trying to configure the fact that we only had 1 game card but 2 switches, then we were trying to figure out what the heck we were supposed to do. It turns out that you basically have to get the 2 Pac-Mans to hug each other after they both have a power fruit, and then you squeeze the life out of it, or at least that's what I think they're doing. I mean, there could be creepier explanations, but I'd rather not go there. And then, to hit the ghosts, you basically do the same thing with them. Once you grab a power-up pellet, then you have to head off the ghost so that you come at them from 2 opposite directions to, again, pop them out of existence. The boss battles in this version felt a lot more thought out than they did in the regular Pac-Man Championship Edition 2. I'm never going to get used to that title. And you would have to treat it like a 2D platformer, where you'd switch the gravity with the press of a button. Kind of reminds me of that old VVV that I once reviewed so long ago. And these are pretty fun, albeit they had a time limit, and I think that's what bogged down the entire experience for both of the championship editions. While they looked and played great, The problem was that I was constantly rushing the clock, and it felt kind of like a contradiction in some ways, because Pac-Man had more than enough lives to spare if he got hit by a ghost, but if he ran out of time, he wouldn't lose a pack. It would just say, nope, you get an automatic game over for that. So, I don't know how many people are going to like that as opposed to the more leisurely paced nature of the original Pac-Man. That being said, once I get to the third segment of this review, you can play the original Pac-Man, but for now, let's transition into Pac-Man Versus. Pac-Man Versus was originally released for the GameCube in 2003, and now it's included on the Nintendo Switch with a single-player mode. And if you do that, then you get to be one of the ghosts, and you basically have bubbles on the screen that show the other fields of vision of the other ghosts, and you have to try to attack Pac-Man before he eats all of the pellets. Obviously, if he eats a power pellet, then he will turn the other ghosts blue, and then he will send them to the jail zone, as I like to call it. Which actually doesn't feel all that penalizing now that I think about it. In some ways, it was actually more of a blessing, because whenever the bonus fruit appears, then that increases whichever ghost caught the fruit, it increases that ghost's field of vision, because Pac-Man can see the whole maze, but the ghosts can only see a little bit. But with the bonus fruit, it's a lot easier to see Pac-Man. You can also choose between different mazes, but I never even tried any of the others because I figured with such a limited field of vision, that's going to feel like wandering around in the dark if I try any of these new mazes. So I'm just going to stick with what I'm used to from the arcades and just go with the tried and true. Maybe that's a flaw of my personality type. You can let me know in the comments if you think so. Now, this is obviously a way better deal than the GameCube version, because in that game, you had to have at least one game, plus one GameCube controller, plus at least one Game Boy Advance, plus a Game Boy Advance GameCube link cable. The person on the GBA would be playing as the ghost and have their limited field of vision on their own screen. Yeah, precursor to the Wii U gamepad. Who would have thought that? And then the person on the TV plays as Pac-Man with a view of the entire field, but on the other hand has the other players all actively trying to chase him. So they balanced it out pretty well, but the fact that you had to shell out so much money for all those accessories and wires, and it just made for a mess, and not to mention the game was really hard to find. I never even was able to pick it up back in the day because it was just so rare, so I'm glad that they put it in a more convenient package. That being said, it's not 100% convenient because the single-player mode gets boring really quickly. Don't get me wrong, I'm glad that it exists, but it's going to have very limited appeal. Now one could argue, but Paul, there's like a ton of mazes to play. Well, in the single-player mode you can only play as the ghost, and you only have limited vision, so that kind of takes away the fun of the experimentation. Also, there's not really a story or anything engaging to keep you interested besides just catch Pac-Man. And literally the only thing that sets this game apart from any other Pac-Man clone is the fact that Mario narrates it. No, I'm not joking. Tell me that there's any other character in video game history that says, Pac-Man Versus! at the title screen. Yeah, try to tell me that's not Mario. So, this game obviously is fun when you're playing in multiplayer, but it was a heck of a time for my friend Nick and me to try to configure our switches so that the game registered that we only had one game pack. The DS and 3DS handled this way better, so maybe Nintendo still has to test the waters a bit, or the two of us were just a bunch of idiots. Maybe you can let us know in the comment section. Either way, this game is okay, but since it's a supplement to an already bigger package, it's really just there to tide you over while you play the meatier games. So now, moving on to the retro stuff. For the finale of this review, I'm going to be talking about the Namco Museum section of the collection, which does include Pac-Man Versus, but because it was optimized for the Nintendo Switch, I felt like it deserved its own section in the review. However, there are also plenty of classic Namco games preserved in their original cheesiness that I felt like while I didn't get a chance to play all of them, or even beat any of them, these games are meant to gobble up your quarters, and even though you have unlimited virtual quarters, that doesn't make them any easier. However, what I do admire is that this collection, unlike most, takes into account every individual game you're playing, and offers unique options for every game. For example, in Gradius, you have a level select that you can do for any level that you've already completed, as opposed to just picking a level at random and saying, oh, I'm going to go to level 29 first. It also tells you exactly how many stages there are in Pac-Man. Turns out there are 265. That's just insane. There's no way I would have completed all that. They also give you options for like how you want to position the game. Do you want a background to appear or not? And overall, I just feel like the attention to different playing styles is absolutely incredible. Not to mention that you have unlimited coins to dump in. So when I was playing Gradius 88, which ironically was released in 87, it was nice that I could just dump in what felt like unlimited continues until I got to the third to last level, after which they just said, nope, we're just not going to let you continue anymore, even though you have more than enough quarters, which I thought was baffling. Either way, the games that I did play in this collection were a lot of fun. I've always been a huge fan of Dig Dug, and so playing that game again was exactly as amazing as I remembered it. Granted, the sound effects and the music are kind of annoying because the music only plays when the Dig Dugger, for lack of a better word, is actually moving. And the creatures also make these really weird sounds when they escape to the surface. Now, I'm not going to talk about the game in depth, but let's just say try not to think about it too hard, and you're in for one of the more unique arcade experiences. But that's what perhaps bogs these games down more than they should. Not that it's their fault. Back then they didn't really have the technology. But then again, these also came after games like Super Mario Brothers and Metroid, so in some cases I wonder what was really their excuse, and that was they're arcade games. They don't really have a deep storyline. They don't really have engaging worlds or anything like that. You basically just take the basic single-screen concept and roll with it. Now, there are games that are newer and older than others. Rolling Thunder, for example, has a bit of scrolling. There's also Splatterhouse, which has a bit more violence. But either way, seeing as they all have online leaderboards, multiplayer connectivity, options, the ability to play the sound test for any of them, admittedly I don't really like all this old music, but the fact that it's available at all is just a nice little touch. So while I may not like or have beaten all of the games in this collection, I like how the developers of this pack said, okay, Timmy is going to want different rule sets than Tommy when he plays Dig Dug, so let's give like 10,000 different combinations. In a way, it almost feels like you're playing Namco Maker. And for that, I highly recommend this collection. Pac-Man Championship Edition 2 gives you a whole different view on Pac-Man. Pac-Man Championship Edition 2 plus 2P, oh my gosh, that game is just weird, but if you're looking for something wild and wacky, go for it. Pac-Man Versus is a nice distraction, and as far as the game selection, this may not be as big as most Namco Museum collections in the past, but at the very least, it has enough of the good stuff that if you're itching for a retro arcade package without having to purchase one of the arcade archives or the NES games that are emulators of these classics on the Virtual Console, then this is a good way to go. Of course, I only rented this, but I think that the only reason you would want to rent this is if you're not a fan of arcadey games. If you are, this is a no-brainer buy, especially because in my opinion, this is by far the definitive edition of Namco Museum to date, and you really can't go wrong with any of these titles from an optimization standpoint. Sure, they weren't exactly updated graphically, but who cares when you have so many cool additions such as HD Rumble when you're playing Gradius 88, those explosions never get old, or when you can get rid of scan lines, stuff like that. It almost feels like they're being remade, but not at the same time, and for that, they're absolutely brilliant. So with that, thank you guys very much for watching. Hope you'll play some of these games for yourself, especially Dig Dug or Pac-Man Championship Edition 2. Those are some of the highlights in my opinion. And until the next time, keep the faith, stay epic, God bless, and don't eat dots as fast as Pac-Man does. You're probably going to die. Bye.